Hello and welcome to the Seer 365 sessions. Every week we have a conversation with interesting people who are involved in the Microsoft Dynamics community. And today is no different. I'm really excited to introduce you to somebody that I've known for a very long time, Mr. Steve Farr. Hello, Mr. Farr.
Hello, Mr. Hughes. How the devil are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Yes, I've known Steve since my first day as a graduate at Microsoft in 2002. So
Wow.
I'm a bit younger than Steve. He's actually only a couple of years older than I am, but he gave up on hair a while ago. So that's,
I gave up on hair when I was at Microsoft, and that was over 10 years ago. So
there's probably a link there somewhere.
there probably is. There probably is.
Yeah. So why don't we start off with a little bit about who you are, Steve?
Yeah. So as Richard said, so I got a background in ERP systems, going back to being an implementation consultant back in the 1980s, if anybody remembers those. And joined Microsoft, was there for about 7 years, working in Microsoft Business Solutions, as it was, until we renamed it Dynamics. I can't remember when that was.
Yeah.
And then moved into the data world in 2010. So been with a couple of organizations involved in BI and also AI before settling 6 years ago into Experian. And I look after a few teams here, dealing with data problems, dealing with bad data, and how we can solve that issue.
So, well, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where organizations spend a lot of money on, systems of record as kind of a broad brush name for them. But really, I guess the data is the bit that without it, everything else falls apart pretty quickly. So how do you tell us about data? How do you get good data into your systems of record?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things going on, which is that lots of organizations have lots of systems and they build up over time. There's a lot of history there and stuff, and so you need to concentrate on everything that happens to that data across its useful life. And as you just said, the first thing is, how do you make sure you get good data in?
Yeah.
I was talking to a colleague earlier, and he was talking about how, as a salesperson, he's always trying to subvert the system, right? Because he wants to get his record in and doesn't really care if that organization still already exists somewhere, and he'll work around it, right? And salespeople are kind of notorious at doing that.
They're notorious for many things, including
well, yeah, and also bringing in the money, right? But so one of the things that we do in Experian is we provide systems that essentially help you validate data as it's going into the systems, and we'll validate addresses. Is this a real address in a real street with a real postcode? And we'll validate emails, for example. So, is it a valid email? Is it in the right format? Does that email address, or does that format? Does that email address exist? Does the domain exist? Those sorts of things. And then then we do the same with phone numbers. But then with those comes lots of extra, what we like to call metadata.
Yeah.
Data about the data. And that can tell you a lot of really interesting stuff. So, if you're delivering stuff to multi-residence addresses like blocks of flats and stuff like that, well, what are the numbers in the block of flats, and how do they relate to each other? Or if you have multiple businesses in a business location, like in an office block and stuff like that, so can you get there? And what's the actual delivery point for that building? Because it might not be the front door. In fact, the front door may not be where you want to take the goods to.
And then can you share that data then? So if my office only takes stuff at the back, is that something that you can then pass on to other customers, or anything?
Yeah. So one of the things that we do is to amalgamate and join data on organizations' behalf, and then that becomes a data set that we'll make available to you through an API,
cool,
or through a batch file. And according to how much extra data we've added on and how much we've joined, you get a bigger data set or a smaller data set. It does also depend on who you are.
Yeah.
So obviously Experian is all about credit, and so we also have lots of credit data. But unless you're a lender, we can't really give you that information.
Yeah.
We also give special sets of information to people like the police forces, which we can't give to everybody.
Sure.
But there's something like 300 data sets that we provide just around addresses, email, and phone.
Very cool. All right. And what about and I am an Experian customer myself. So
Good.
I yeah, well, it was kind of more to make sure that nobody's using my name and taking out credit cards in my name and stuff.
All of that.
They'll go onto a shock as soon as they see my credit rating, but it would be they can give it a shot.
I can't see that, Richard. I can't see it.
You can't see it. Okay, good. Yeah, I've got a great one, honest. So that's cool. So and what about, so one of the things that we've seen over the years with customers is you go through a data cleanse, typically at a new ERP, which is kind of, or CRM system, which is kind of my side of things a bit more. And then the data lives there, and then nobody's really looking after the data. The data itself gets a bit older. So is that something you can help with as well?
Yeah. So the problem with old data is, particularly with contact data, is that stuff just changes. And so if you just take the UK as an example, if you're dealing with consumers in the UK, you've got about 3 million people who move home every year.
Wow.
So is that contact actually living where you expect them to be? If you drop some marketing on them or send them their bank statement or whatever it is you're doing, is it going to arrive? Then you've got 600,000 people who unfortunately die in the UK. And some of you might remember some big supermarkets getting into trouble a few years ago because of marketing to dead people, which is never very popular. Newspapers to get hold of that. You've got people who change their name by deed poll, and then you've got people who get married, change their name for that reason as well. And then you've got and then you've got the business side of it. So if you're doing B2B, again, there are something like 650,000 new companies created in the UK every year. I don't quite know why there are so many companies in the UK. The whole population's got about 4 each at the moment, on average.
Well, you can only blame me for one at the moment, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you've got people coming onto the register, people coming off the register, you've got dormant companies and so on and so forth. And just managing that diversity, and then all the directors within those businesses as well. Are they still directors of those businesses? Are they directors of other businesses that you do business with? So maybe you've got bad credit with XYZ company, and now ABC company come along, and you don't realize actually they're the same people running it, and those sorts of things. So we can help you join up that kind of data and make sure that your current view is as accurate as it can be.
Yeah, I know when we were setting up Seer, there was an issue where we had a registered address in London, and there was some other companies at, you just kind of buy that registered address sort of thing. And there was other organizations in the building that maybe weren't kosher. Let's go with that for fear of legal reprisals. And that actually causes a problem. So I'm guessing on the back end, whoever we were dealing with at the time, they should have been able to sort of see the differences and know
they should be able to see they've got a different trading address, for example.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then we get this inside like retail and distribution all the time, where a company's got 500 addresses because they're delivery points, and you don't want to be sending a tanker to number 1 Park Lane because that's a registered address, right?
Yeah, no, that'd be interesting. Oh, cool. And so with the duplicate, and that's how you would deal with the duplicate as well, would you kind of go through that same process?
Yeah, so duplicates is we all have problems with duplicate records, right? And duplicates is maybe 3 parts science and 1 part art. And at the very basic level, you could say, okay, I've got a record here, and it says Richard Hughes, number 5, Acacia Avenue, and I've got another record saying Richard Hughes, number 5, Acacia Avenue, and every single character in every single field is identical. And so we can apply something called string matching to say, actually, that string of characters is identical. It's a duplicate. Okay, now I've got another record that says Rich Hughes at number 1, Acacia Avenue. Okay, well, that's probably the same person.
Yeah.
But now I've got Richard M. Hughes at number 4, Acacia Avenue. Well, you might well have a neighbor who's also called Richard Hughes. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I got less certainty there. And so we need to systematically work out what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable for different use cases. We get into the thing about fuzzy matching. So, how similar are things? Are things just misspelt? Do things sound the same? Yeah. So, I don't know, Sean and Sean, one with an E, one with an I, they sound the same. So they pass at a certain level, but they're not identical, but it still might want to be considered a duplicate. And so we help people through those problems. And that's just sort of comparing their records in one or multiple systems. And then what we can do is say, well, actually, at Experian, because we have the Bureau, which is a record of 40 million consumers in the UK who have a credit record, we can also, as a service provider, match to what we know about those people, which is based on sort of 6 years of credit history, and say, okay, well, we actually think that Richard lives at number 4, and he used to live at number 1, but he moved down the road 3 years ago, and we can trace that through his credit record. And so that may or not be useful. And that's kind of more, they call it deterministic matching. But you might want to look at that from different aspects then, because why am I building these rules to find these duplicates? Do I want to send marketing materials to you? In which case, if I send a brochure to number 1 and number 4, do I really care? Do I care that much? Okay. Maybe I'm sending a bank statement. Oh, now I do care.
Yeah.
So in one instance, I might have quite a loose set of rules, and the other instance, I might have a really, really tight set of rules.
Yeah.
So actually, I don't want to do that. And then there's other use cases as well. So one of the use cases we come across a lot is fraud, especially since lockdown, because all these retailers went online, subscription services, and what they do is introduce special offers to get you on board, to get you in the subscription. And so what do people do? They sign up with subtly different IDs all the time. You got Rich Hughes at Seer 365, Rich Hughes at Gmail, Rich Hughes at Google Mail, Rich Hughes at blah, 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 etc., all trying to get, they'll say you do this, Rich. Of course you don't. It's just an example. But trying to get you £10 off multiple times.
If I'd have been clever enough, I would have done it. It just never occurred to me.
So it kind of, that has become one of the dominant use cases since lockdown.
So they're actually clamping down on that sort of thing by using your service then?
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm thinking something like Netflix as an example. I don't know if they're one of your customers or not, but that sort of thing I could see, because they do that sort of 3-month trial, don't they? So
the famous instance internally, and unfortunately we can't, well, for obvious reasons, we can't tell you who the company was, but we found one person on their system 1,453 times.
Because that takes effort to do that. To be fair to them,
real level.
Yeah.
But it's worth a tenner every time. I don't know how much it was worth, that particular one, but you can see the sort of problems that people have absolutely inadvertently got into by going online, and which they had to do, right? So
very cool,
interesting stuff.
So as far as I don't think it's a hard sell to say to people you need good data. I think that's I think that's a fairly apparent thing. But so if you're so we have different people that view this and listen to us. And hello, if you are watching it live, feel free to add some questions. And we've still got a few minutes left. So if you've got any questions for Steve, please free to ask, including why did he let me into Microsoft? What sort of tips would you give to any organization that's sort of looking at their data and thinking, we really should put a bit more effort into this?
I think the big thing is that people don't know how bad their data is, really.
Yeah.
They know it causes problems on a day-to-day basis, and sometimes, and they're kind of worried in the back of their minds that there might be a huge crisis in the background because they might get exposed by the sun for marketing to dead people or something, right?
Yeah,
and
sure.
so there's that kind of big threat, and then there's the day-to-day irritation. One thing that you can do is, if you don't want to commit towards online systems, API checks right up front because you can't justify the ROI, then you can send us a sample of your data and we'll profile it. We run something like 70 different sets of stats across every single column of data. And free of charge, we'll tell you what's good or bad about that data. And then you can make a decision, right? And it might be
that's a really cool offer, actually. I don't know you did that.
You can then go full hog and say, right, okay, we'll buy a load of software from you, Experian. Or you might say, actually, do us a one-off cleanse. And we have customers who come back to us time and time again, once a quarter, once a year, something like that, just go clean our customer file, clean our supplier file, that sort of stuff. So that's another way of doing it. It's halfway.
I guess that depends on how static your data is. Although nowadays, I don't know how many customers would have very static data. I mean, most things are changing quite frequently. So,
and at times like what they call it, Cyber Tuesday and Black Friday and stuff like that, we're checking billions of records every day online because you need to guarantee if you're delivering goods to customers, you need to make sure that's right.
Of course. So
especially in that area, it very easily adds up the ROI case.
Yeah, very cool. Well, thanks for that, Steve. So I think we're going to end it there. I really appreciate you joining us today. To be honest, every time I chat with you, I always feel a bit brighter at the end of it. So I really appreciate you. It's a pretty low bar, though. But
you're such a smoothie, Richard. Always have been.
But I really appreciate your time, and thanks everybody for watching this. If you would like to get in touch with Steve and know more, see how we can help your organization, I put his LinkedIn profile down there, and I'll put it on. If you're listening to this on the podcast, I'll put it in the show notes as well. But thank you very much, Steve, and I hope everybody out there has a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers, Richard.